Turn your Bibles to 1 Kings. We're going to get there in a few minutes. But as you're turning, I want you to open up your palms in front of you and place them out right in front of you. Something I do, and it's just, I just want you to kind of posture yourself to hear from the truth from the Lord this morning. And I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to ask the Lord to speak directly to your heart right now. There's something that you need to hear, something that you need to know, something that you need to feel. And I'm praying that the Lord speaks directly to your heart right now. So just take a second and you pray that to yourself. God, you're so holy. And the moment we can step into your presence, everything changes. And so, God, we ask you right now to meet us this morning at Revolution Church, God. Did you allow the truths of your words to come alive this morning, God? Would you meet us here? Would you set people free? Amen. Well, the title of the message is actually called Down for the Count. And down for the count is something, that's the first thing when Richard said, hey, would you want to speak after the women's retreat? At first, I said, I don't know, let me think about it. Let me pray about it. And I heard the Lord say, down for the count. And I was like, down for the count. And I said, okay, I'll do it. And so I asked God to really begin to develop what that looks like. And I believe that there's people in this room this morning that you feel like you're down for the count. And in boxing, that's a term of when you go down for 10, you got 10 seconds to get back up, right? And I know just from hearing from the women this weekend, there's a lot of women that are down for the count. And we're cheering and we are begging God for us to get back up and to be able to move in a direction. You know, I hate boxing. I hate everything about it. I don't know why. I love Rocky IV. It's my favorite Rocky movie. Anybody else love Rocky IV? Oh, I love it so much. Richard bought those trunk things and he likes to wear them sometimes. And so basically he thinks he's Rocky. We were in college. We were in this class. And there was this guy, and we were talking about some things that were really hard topics, okay? And so this guy said something that was really inappropriate about me. And he said, let's just say if it was your girl. And Richard challenged him to a boxing match back at the dorm that I didn't know about. So he gets back. He puts his no, he didn't put his trunks on. But he gathers everybody in the basement of his dorm. His friends told me. He didn't even tell me. And guess what he did? He beat that boy like a Russian. He boxed somebody, literally, y'all. I guess he didn't fight him, right? The guy put on boxing gloves too, whatever. But he acted like he was Rocky, and I love that about him because he's cute. But what I know is that when we're in a season of this knockout, it's not if you get knocked down, but when. It's not if, but when. When you get knocked down, it happens. And you're knocked out, and you're knocked down maybe 10 months. It may be 3 years. It may be days. I don't know what your being knocked down looks like. You probably already think about it in your head. I'm seeing some of you nod. And what I know is that when you're down, what's your posture going to be? When you're down for the count, and you have no idea if you are capable of getting back up, what is your posture going to be in that time? Because what your posture is determines the direction that you're going to go when you do get back up. It really does determine it. So if you have your Bibles, turn to 1 Kings chapter 18. I'm wearing my reading glasses because the more that I wear them, the more my eyes are becoming acclimated to them. Brittany, after backstage, she said, take your glasses off. I said, oh gosh, I can't. So here we are. Okay. After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah. Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land. Okay, that's obvious. There's a drought, right? There's something, and we're going to get there, but something's not right. It's been after a long time. In the what year? The 3rd year. That sparked something in me. It's like the 3rd year. What does that mean? I've got to go check it out. And when I began to read and dive more deeply into it, there was this drought that was happening, a severe famine. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But a lot of times when we're in seasons of drought ourselves, droughts can lead us into fear. Droughts can lead us into anger. Droughts can lead us into confusion, to making rash decisions and chaos. When we get knocked down, so many times our posture goes into a place of confusion and chaos and manipulation, and we're fighting and we can't even see. I always think about when the Russian falls, like he can barely see because there's so much blood, and they're just like swinging for air. They're there for a little while. And so all of a sudden we're swinging and we're trying to do something to get back up, and we have no clarity or clear vision of what our next steps are. And so we find our place in this crazy place of confusion and fear and anger towards God. You know, I think about how it must have looked in Haiti a couple weeks ago. Several of us who have been in this place where a lot of you sponsor the kiddos in that village that we sponsor. And a lot of you have seen the actual village that we've been in. And a lot of you have seen the poverty from the time you get out of the airplane to the moment you pull into the village, the poverty of little bitty girls walking the side of the roads that are 3 years old that are hungry. I have a girl in my mind, Elfanye, who is my girl that I get to sponsor. I love her, and I started thinking about this mindset of this severe famine. See, their severe famine began with a government who withheld food from them, and chaos erupted in that country. They began to throw punches and robbing each other, and it was literally so much craziness that Ashley Frady wasn't able to go to Haiti a few weeks ago. Eddie George couldn't go help build the school for the village. The kids in that village could not go to school. See, when we are hungry, we do crazy things. When we get knocked down, we do crazy things. We begin to put every bit of our strength into our hands, thinking that we can somehow manipulate or do whatever it takes to get us back up. And I say that you have to move your posture into the place of, but God. But God. In 1 Kings 17, when we're going to back up, because have you ever seen at the beginning of a boxing match when they say, ding, 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 and all of a sudden this is what the boxers are doing? And they're just like dancing almost. It's so weird. But they just like rock it back and forth. And they're waiting for the first person to do what? Throw the first punch. And so I started thinking, who threw the first punch? It was definitely Elijah. See, Elijah's posture while down wasn't a posture of giving up. Instead, he leaned in for God's word, his provision, and his next step. Elijah's posture was the opposite of chaos. Elijah's posture was the opposite of fear and anger. It was a posture of saying, wow, there is no food in the land. There's a severe famine. I'm going to lean into your word. I'm going to lean into your provision, and I'm going to take my next step based on what you tell me to do. And that's exactly what happened. So I started thinking, okay, let's see how he threw the first punch. Let's go to 17:1. Now Elijah, the Tishbite from Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab, who's the king, as the Lord, the God of Israel lives, whom I serve, there will be neither dew or nor rain in the next few years except at my word. How bold is that? Guess what, buddy, king? There's not going to be any rain unless I say so. How bold is that? He threw the first punch, right? I started thinking, this is so crazy how he delivered the blow, because guess what happened? A severe famine happened. But guess what God did? Let's look at verse 2. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, leave here, there's a direction, turn eastward and hide in the Kerith ravine, east of the Jordan. You will drink from the brook, and I have directed the ravens to supply you with food there. So he did what the Lord had told him. He went to the ravine east of the Jordan and stayed there. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread, this is literally Richard's dream, bread and the meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the brook. Y'all, there was a severe famine going on. And what did God do? He spoke to him. He listened. He went in the direction he told him to go, and he supplied him exactly what he needed. He even gave him meat. He gave him bread and meat. He supplied what he needed. See, Elijah chose to listen to God's voice. He chose it. He obeyed God's voice. Elijah was satisfied even in the midst of the severe famine and drought. He was satisfied, right? He was satisfied. But see, Elijah could have panicked. He could have panicked the moment that Ahab became king. We're going to back up to 1 Kings 16. Verse 29. Because when I started thinking about the first blow, he threw the first blow. But this is why he threw the first blow. There was a king that stepped into reign who was evil. It's like when you see middle school boys about to get in a fight and they just circle, 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 circle. I'm like, then they start talking smack. I've seen it 1,000 times. Like, no you, no you, no you, no mom. And it's like, oh, you said my mom. And it's like, boom, right? This is what I see. He's talking about his guy. Let's look at verse 16, chapter 29. 16 verses 29, I'm sorry. In the 38th year of Asa, king of Judah, Ahab, son of Omri, became king of Israel, and he reigned in Samaria over Israel 22 years. Ahab, son of Omri, did more evil in the eyes of the Lord than any of those before him. He not only considered it trivial to commit the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, but he also married Jezebel, daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians, began to serve Baal and worship him. He set up an altar for Baal in the temple of Baal that he built in Samaria. Ahab also made an Asherah pole and did more to arouse the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than did all the kings of Israel before him. This guy is a bully and he is evil. He is the Russian in this video. Like, he is mean. He is tough and he's doing terrible things. And he threw the first punch. And Elijah says, no. That's not how it's going to happen. Because what I know is that you don't have to fight on empty. Think about it, like this is setting up for the big old fight. Like, it's coming up in a second. We're going to talk about the fight. But what I started realizing, there's so many times where I tell people, you're just being attacked this week. You're being attacked. I know. I mean, y'all, 6 people about dropped out of the women's retreat because of crazy stuff happening. How many of you have felt some kind of crazy something happen just this week alone? Anybody in this room? Yes, me too, a lot. And what I was realizing is I was on the podcast this week talking to this lady, and we were talking through some stuff, and she said, we women and like our thoughts, we get so attacked. And it made me think about boxing and about fighting. When you're attacked, that implies that you're ambushed. Attack means that you're not ready for the first punch. See, we've been clothed in the armor of God, and we have everything we need to fight back. We just choose not to use those weapons or not. So it's not a matter of being attacked. It's a matter of fighting back. You have to choose to fight back. You have to choose to be in God's word, to listen to his voice, to keep your eyes on his promises, and trust him with no matter if you're down for 5 years, 2 months, or 2 weeks. You've got to make sure that your posture is towards him and to him alone. Everything. You don't have to fight on empty, guys. You don't have to. He was filled up. He has some meat in his belly, right? He was ready. He was ready to go down. And what I know is that God was preparing Elijah for the ultimate showdown so that he would be made known, and then Elijah's strength would be even more and more and more strength in his faith. I think about the Rocky and the Russian video, and it's crazy because I think, how did they get to that point? But he killed his bestie, right? They were best friends, and he killed his bestie, and he said, oh, it's going down. And he starts training. And where does he train? In Russia. He has no equipment. He only used what he had right in front of him. And he is training and doing everything he can because it is time for the fight. And the whole movie, if he'd have lost that movie, could you imagine that franchise? It would have been terrible. But he is preparing for that one battle against this guy who is obviously way bigger and way better. But in the drought, Elijah relied on the voice of God to feed him, to sustain him, and to set him up for victory. And that's what's happening right now when you're knocked down. You think that you are helpless. You think that you're hopeless. You think there's nothing in sight. I'm here to tell you that God is setting you up for a victory because he's going to get glory from it. Yes. But the reality is that your provision may not come from ravens. It may come from Life Group. Your provision, you heard what Lacey said. When she said that I was backstage, I was like, oh, yes. Community is key. I could not go week by week if I didn't have people pouring into me. There's not a day that goes by that Blake does not text me. Something encouraging, calling me. We talk on the phone. Like, she checks on me all the time. I need that so much. There's not a day that goes by that our Life Group, Radiant Life Group, we are always talking about the birds, the bees, I'm just kidding, the birds, to flower pots, to, oh my goodness, will you pray? Like, I'm in desperation. Right, ladies? Seeing Heather C. up on this stage, I call her Heather because we have Heather Z, Heather C. Seeing Heather C. up here on the stage, I stood back there and just cried. This is a woman who came into our life group who did not talk. She sat really quietly. She took perfection of notes. She read her homework always, even if I didn't read mine. Just kidding. And so she would literally turn the pages. She'd read these perfect notes. And then little by little, I watched the Lord just kind of reach down in her and just pull something out. And I just waited in the pocket. I'm like, I'm going to jump. And then she finally verbalized, hey, my word is going to be, what is it going to be, Heather? I'm making you say it. Commit. She's ready to go all in. Then she said, let's have a coffee date. And we did, and she went all in. And the next thing I know, she signed up for the women's retreat. Next thing I know, she's standing up on the stage talking about what God has done in her life. Yes, it starts from being knocked down. She was knocked down before she started coming back to life group, right? She had a major thing happen in her life, and she came back and went all in. See, what happens in that place of the knockdown, provision's going to come, but it may not be come in the way that you think it's going to come. It's not going to come in that way. The fight's crazy. It's about to go down. Okay, let's look at 18, verses 16 through 21. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. So up to this point, let me stop really quick. Up to this point, when it says at the very beginning where it says, after a long time, he said, go and present yourself to Ahab. He hadn't seen him in 3 years because he's mad, right? They're killing all the prophets. And so he's out for blood and he's going to kill him. So this is the part where he's like talked to Obadiah, who's a believer, and says, hey, I'm going to present myself to him, so you better go tell him. So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him, is that you, you troubler of Israel? I have not made trouble for Israel, Elijah replied, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people over from all Israel to meet me on the Mount Carmel and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table. Goodness. Elijah went before the people and said, how long will you waver between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him. But the people said what? Nothing. And what I know, y'all, is when you're wavering between two things, you're not committed to either. Because I know that I love Diet Coke. Diet Cherry Sundrop is like my favorite thing right now. But I know one thing. There's one thing that my husband better not ever buy me in a convenience store, and that is what, honey? Diet Pepsi. I hate Diet Pepsi. We got in an argument for 30 minutes one time coming back from Florida. I'm like, do you even know me? Ask my kids, they'll tell you. We like argued. I was like, I cannot believe you. I literally sent you there to get me a drink. You bring me a Diet Pepsi. We've been together for, he will tell you the truth, right? I was furious at him. He gave me Diet Pepsi. So don't ever give me Diet Pepsi. Just give me Cadbury eggs and Diet Cherry Sundrop. Really wanted Diet Cadbury egg. Okay, so don't buy me that. My life group will kill me. Okay, what I started thinking about is there's so many people. I remember Heather's message she did several months ago where literally he erupted this church and had everybody on their knees. Y'all, you got to make a decision. You cannot be this wavering believer. You can't. It really, truly does matter for the next generation. My kids are watching you. If Heather and AJ wavered, guess who's going to waver behind them? My kids. I count on them to be in the Word and to be following Jesus the same way that we depend on Richard to be in the Word. And I promise you he is, and he is praying all the time for you. Sometimes it gets on my nerves. But I'm so thankful for it. I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful for the leaders in this church. I'm thankful for the band. I'm thankful for you who serve just endless hours at this place. I'm so thankful, but you've got to choose. You can't be wavering back and forth, back and forth. You've got to pick who the one true God is in your life. 1 Kings 18:22. Then Elijah said to them, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left. How many? The only one. Crazy as Rocky Balboa. All right, I'm the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves and let them cut into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of my God. The Lord who answers by fire, he is God." Then all the people said, "What you say is good." Elijah said to the prophets of Baal, "Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first. Since there are so many of you, call on the name," so many of you, right? "Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire." So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of the Baal from morning till noon. "Baal, answer us," they shouted. But there was no response. No one answered. And they made a bonfire, s'mores. No, I was kidding. And they danced around the altar they had made. What I realized is following false gods, believing the lies, and choosing not to surrender will always cause us to make rash decisions. Because I want you to hear me say, because they literally said what? They're made of fire and they're like dancing about it. They're screaming out to God. But I want you to look back at verse 29. Midday passed. 27. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them. "Shout louder." This is like all the people on the sidelines are like taunting people. He says, "Surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought, or busy, or traveling. Maybe he is sleeping and must be awakened." So they shouted louder. And what did they do to themselves? Slash themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. In my mind, I'm thinking, you went from dancing and eating s'mores to slashing yourself. But that's what happens when we're trying to do things on our own. When we become so chaotic, when we're down for the count. These people were hungry. Remember, they hadn't been eating in 3 years. They're hungry. And we will do crazy things when we're hungry. How many of you remember that cartoon? I don't know what it is. I asked Ashley Freddie this morning. Remember that cartoon where all of a sudden the guy looks at his dog and it becomes like a chicken? I don't know what that is. But I started thinking about Richard and Cookie, his dog. She's this cute little Pomeranian who's really, really sassy. I mean, y'all, she might as well have her toenails painted. She is sassy. And she loves her daddy more than anybody on the planet. She will pee for him in an instant. So he sees her, and he always walks around going, "Down my cookie, girl, my cookie." I'm going to tape it one day, and I'm going to show everybody. It's going to be awesome. It's so funny. But I thought to myself, little Miss Cookie might turn into a cookie if Richard got too hungry, right? Because he's always talking about food. But it's so funny how we get to that place where we can do some crazy things, and chaos can bring ultimate confusion. There were hundreds of these people yelling and screaming to their God, saying, "Throw down this fire." They were waiting and waiting for him to move, and he was nowhere to be seen, and they began slashing about and acting like crazy people. Look back at verse 30 through 40. Then Elijah said to all the people, "Come here to me." They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord, which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, pebbles and stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying, "Your name shall be Israel." With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them, "Fill 4 large jars with the water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again," he said, and they did it again. "Do it a 3rd time," he ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. And what I started thinking about, y'all, is here you have 2 altars. They haven't seen a drop of rain. I wonder where they got the water from. They haven't seen rain. And he's asking him to go 3 different times to pull this big, huge trench up, to pour it all over the altar. He was confident in a God that he served. He had already seen him bring bread and meat from a bird. He was confident his God was going to show up to fight. He was confident his God was going to be victorious. He knew it. And what I know is that God's promises, God's power, God's provision, God's goodness, it's always going to be made known. You just get to choose if you want to be a part of that. You have to choose to be part of that, yes. But getting knocked down while trusting in the waiting, y'all, it truly does determine the direction that you're going to go when you get back up. It truly, truly does. I want to pick back up. At the time of the sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed, Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I'm your servant and have done all the things at your command. Answer me, Lord, answer me, so the people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again. Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soils, and also licked up the water in the trench. It's amazing. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried, the Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God. See, when you're knocked down and your posture isn't into the posture of literally face down before God, there are people that are counting on it, y'all. They need to see in the season that you're knocked down, that God is still God and that he is still in control and he can still do crazy, amazing miracles. He can do it. And the truth is, you don't have to stay down. You don't have to stay down. I want you to look back over at 41. And Elijah said to Ahab, go eat and drink, for there is the sound of a heavy rain. There was no rain yet, but he knew that God was going to send it. So Ahab went off to eat and drink, but I want you to look at the direction that he went. But Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees. Go and look toward the sea, he told his servant, and he went up and he looked. There's nothing there, he said. 7 times. Elijah said, go back. The 7th time the servant reported, a cloud as small as my hand's hand is rising from the sea. He knew that after this massive, severe famine and drought, that his God was going to show up and pour out and pour out and pour out, and people were going to return back to the one true God. And this morning, there's people in this room that it's time for you to return back to the one true God. Because dependency on a false idol leads to desperation, and it's basically just you dancing around the fire alone. Dependency on a false idol, on a husband, on a wife, on a dream, on a fear, on an insecurity, on your pride, on your laziness, on your apathy. If you're depending on that false idol that's not the one true God, you are going to be in a place of desperation, period. But when your dependency on God alone leads to determination that stirs a new sense of freedom and worship within us, then no matter the knockout, we will always worship the one true God. The one true God. You cannot serve your bank account and God. You cannot worship your relationship and God. It's like Diet Coke and Pepsi. Come on. You've got to worship God, and out of the overflow of that, I get my man. I worship God with everything that I have, and out of the overflow of that, I get to be with my children. I get to stand up on stage and communicate and want people to see the truth about who God is so desperately. But I have to posture myself in the place of surrender over and over and over again. I had my pride knocked out of me last week. But last week in Unleash, last Sunday, I was standing right down here, and I heard God say so clearly, go to the altar. I said, no, I'm not. I'll fight right here. There's nobody down there, God. I'm not going to go by myself. And I fought myself and the one true God because I let pride become what I worshiped in that moment. And I did not come to that altar. My neck was sweating, my palms were sweating, and I knew I was supposed to go. And on Wednesday night, this one particular student, I'm not going to say his name, but he came down to the front of the altar, and this kid came in, was super timid, super afraid of everything, and he sat on his face before God in that room, and nobody went down there but him. And then next thing I know, there were 7 of them down there. And then he comes back and begins praying over all the other people down at the altar. And I thought, oh, Holly, you're so prideful. It's okay for me to be broken. What in the world do I think that I have to have it all together? Because I do not. And I started thinking about that. And And there's some fires that need to come down from heaven in your life, and I know that. And I want to encourage you, don't you dare sit there in fear. Don't you dare sit there holding on to a promise that can be unleashed the moment you hit your knees. There's things that God is stirring in this room. He is healing people. He is doing miraculous things. And I'm telling you, I want to be a part of that. Don't you, as a church? I want to be a part of that. And the part of the brokenness becomes part of the healing, which becomes part of the victory. I love that so much. Last night, those women, literally, if you go ahead and turn the lights down and stand up for me. You guys will stand up. Last night, we had a moment. It was crazy. I remember we had bags made that said, I will build. We had little koozies made that said, build. I told Heather, I was like, oh, by the way, Heather's games were insanely good. My daughter ate a pickle with her toe. It was terrible. I sent it to Richard. He said, she's grounded. She did. And Leslie did twerk. It was quite the spectacle. And it was so crazy because I got to reconnect with a middle school friend of mine. We were roommates this weekend, and we got to have some deep conversations, and tears flowed in my room a lot. It was great. But last night, it was a game changer. Ben Kaler came up to me at the end. He was sobbing. He said, oh my gosh. He said, Holly, I couldn't stop crying. I can't wait to raise my family here. I can't wait to be among this. I can't wait for my kids and my family to be at this place. There's something different. And he was like bawling his little eyes out, and he made me cry. I finally just said, okay, I gotta go. I was killing me. I was about to die. And the band was saying, Holly, every single person in that room was going for it. There was a girl that was in our group who has not danced in like 3 years, and I've known her for a very long time, and I looked over and she's dancing, and I lost it. And she came up to me, she said something to me, and I was like, when's the last time that you danced? She said 3.5 years ago. And she worshiped with such intensity last night. Like, women, am I kidding? It was insane. It was like the fire from heaven fell in that little chapel on top of that mountain, and we were not getting up until we had business with God. But what I know is in the midst of all that, we need you. If you're a woman that didn't go on that retreat, you are not excluded from the promises and the power of God. Men, you are not excluded from the promises and the power of God. There's something that God is doing within this church, and it is mind-blowing to me. It is mind-blowing to Richard. Every week we talk about, my gosh, I can't believe this. But this morning before we leave here, I want this altar. I want you to visualize this thing is literally soaking wet with water and a sacrifice that came through Jesus. He went to the cross so that you could walk in freedom. He went to the cross so that you may have eternal life. He went to the cross so that you could be free in Him. And if your marriage is down for the count, get down to this altar and call out to the God, the one true God. If you feel hopeless, come to the altar and call down the fire and the power of God. If you need a drastic change in your bank account, come down here and leave it on the altar. If you're fearful of what your next step is, if you feel lazy, get down here and call out the fire from heaven to fall.